In this video, I'm going to examine the subtext of the 2017 film It, not to be confused with the more recent It Chapter 2. Maybe I'll look at that at some other time. I don't know. The first It set records as the highest grossing horror film of all time, which is kind of strange because that It really isn't that scary. But I would argue that it's not the scariness of the film that made it successful. It was the quality of directing, quality of the writing, and more importantly, the way it resonates with people. A lot of people don't really understand why it resonates with them so much, but I'm going to explain it in this video. The reason it resonates is all about the subtext, or in other words, what the film is really about beneath the surface level story. On the surface, It is a coming-of-age film about a group of adolescents who band together, partly out of mutual social failings and partly to protect themselves from the town bully. The group then ends up using its power in numbers to combat a much larger menace, which attempts to divide and conquer the group at every turn. However, underneath that surface-level narrative, at least as I've interpreted it, It can be read as a metaphor for modern America. The teenagers in the film represent various demographics of the American population, and their small town of Derry represents America itself. With that in mind, the underlying narrative of the film can be viewed as a tale about the masses of American citizens negatively affected by various social issues, and the message to the viewers is that these oppressed masses need to put aside their differences and come together to rebel against their common enemy, which is trying to keep them at odds with one another. Now, for anyone who for some reason doesn't get what I'm talking about, let's take a quick glance at modern day America. No one gets along, everyone is separated into groups and taught by the media, by the government, by their family, culture, social circle, etc. to distrust or even hate the other groups. Some examples: I'm white, you're black. I'm Christian, you're Muslim. I was born here, you weren't. I'm straight, you're not. I'm pro-choice, you're anti-abortion. I'm left-wing, you're right. I'm right-wing, you're alt-right. Get what I'm saying? As time passes, the American public is becoming more and more divided and distracted, bickering about all kinds of social differences and making it virtually impossible for any great number of citizens to pull together and attempt to influence change on levels that truly affect their own survival as a nation. And by that I mean important issues like healthcare and tax reform, which are being structured more and more to suit the desires of the financial elite as opposed to the needs of the average citizen. Anyway, let's get back to the movie and look at Derry as a microcosm for America. People in Derry die or disappear 6 times the national average. That's relevant because of the high rate of violence in America compared to the rest of the developed world. America is depicted as a police state, a reality that's growing as bills continue to be passed in the US that break down the walls of privacy and the rights of American citizens. Meanwhile, evidence continues to surface showing gross abuse of power by American law enforcement personnel. In Derry, a curfew is in place and there is a constant police presence. You see it in this shot, in this one, oh, in this one. And here at the scene in the park, it's like the police are just walking in a circle around them, especially when the black kid is talking. Anyway, there's a serious effort to make the Derry is America subtext visible to the viewer by way of omnipresent Americana. There are American flags in so many shots, and the American national anthem can be heard in the background at different points. For example, as Eddie walks along the street in this scene, he's whistling the anthem into his hands. Part of the film takes place on the 4th of July weekend. Here's a shot with balloons and the American flag billowing in the background. Balloons are an important part of the symbolism in this film, as they are a colorful distraction to keep people from paying attention to the horrible things that are going on around them. In America, that could represent entertainment media or even the American dream. Pennywise suggests giving Bill a balloon to cheer him up, and then he offers Georgie one too, before killing him. In the library, Ben follows a balloon and then he's chased by a headless boy. Later, Henry finds a balloon attached to his mailbox which contains the knife he lost earlier in the film. He then uses it to murder his father. The point is, these balloons always lead the characters to a dark and dangerous place. Speaking of dark and dangerous places, let's talk about America again. Specifically, its slowly worsening loss of freedom.
She, Georgie. You call boat she.
But the SS Georgie isn't just a boat, it's symbolic of liberty. Lady Liberty, which is really why we have to call it she. Near the end of the film, Bill asks Georgie if she was fast, and Georgie says,
I couldn't keep up with it.
It got away from Georgie, just like liberty has gotten away from America. The brand of wax Bill uses to waterproof the SS Georgie is Gulf wax, alluding to America's military presence and tapping of resources in the Persian Gulf area. A stretch you might think, but oh wait, why is the brand called Gulf? Because it's made by the Gulf Oil Company, which in the 80s The decade in which this film is set was a successful corporation which based much of its operation in the Middle East. After this shot, Bill walks right to left to look out his window, directional movement that signifies antagonism in film. For anyone who doesn't know this, in film and television, the good guy, or woman if you want to nitpick my androcentric phrasing, moves left to right on screen and the bad guy moves right to left. Sometimes there are exceptions, but generally this is the rule. In this shot, my first thought was maybe the director didn't want to shoot Bill from the opposite side to avoid disorienting the audience, but then I rewatched the scene and I realized that Bill had just been shot from behind moments later. Therefore, that shot could have been used to show him moving left to right as the film's protagonist. But the director likely chose to show Bill moving the way he did for a reason, which would be to imply villainy on the part of the American government for its actions in the Middle East. Add to the fact that Bill just used a Middle Eastern oil product to waterproof a boat that represents liberty, which gets away from Georgie and leads him to his doom, and that's some deep and heavy shit. And at this point, the opening credits haven't even finished. As Georgie runs down the street chasing his boat, we see this street sign. Now, there was a Jackson Street in the book, so this could just be coincidental. But my guess is the creators of the film made sure to include this detail because of the relevance of America's 7th president, Andrew Jackson, to the film's subtext. For anyone unfamiliar with Andrew Jackson, he was known for his criticism of the corrupt aristocracy and support of the working class. The old lady, who occasionally observes Georgie's activity as he looks for his lost boat, represents the baby boomer generation who, in trying to enjoy retirement and the wonderful country they fought to preserve freedom in so many years ago, now find themselves fighting for their own comfort and security in an economic storm as they watch the younger generation do foolish things to surrender the liberty they fought so hard to protect. When Georgie loses his boat down the storm drain, we meet Pennywise the Clown for the first time.
Hi, Georgie. Aren't you going to say hello?
Oh wait, sorry, wrong Pennywise. Here you go. Pennywise, or it, represents that corrupt aristocracy. The bourgeoisie, the elite, the upper 1%, the patriarchy, whatever gross abuse of power you want to associate with the character. That's really what it is in this film. And this is a haunting image here as Pennywise holds the boat, aka Liberty, just out of Georgie's reach, beckoning him to descend into a very dark place to reclaim it.
Take it, Georgie.
Also note that Pennywise is holding the boat in his left hand and that he ends up grabbing Georgie a few minutes later with that same hand. In politics, left means liberal, right means conservative. In America, left means Democrat, right means Republican. So Obama is left, Trump is right. Anyway, Georgie reaches out to get the SS Georgie from Pennywise with his right arm, which gets torn off. Another example of this right-left symbolism comes later, as Mike is getting beaten down by a pack of racist alt-right white boys. He looks up to see Pennywise waving at him with a severed right arm from the bushes. In the house on Neibold Street, Eddie falls and breaks his right arm, and in that same scene, Pennywise slashes Ben with the claws on his right hand. The only other time I spotted significant use of the left hand is the final scene of the film after Pennywise has been defeated. The kids all cut open their left hands and make a blood pact to return in 27 years if Pennywise comes back. It's not shown in this film, but as they all grow up and leave Derry, they forget about everything that happened here, including this blood pact. So the subtext here is two things. One, that there's something very broken and dangerous about the right-wing or conservative end of the political spectrum in America. And two, even though the liberal philosophy of the left might seem morally upright and enticing to some, it's still just an illusion that the same powers that be have ultimate control over. Pretty much when it comes to government in America, it doesn't matter which of the two big parties you vote for, you're screwed either way. Moving on, there also seems to be a social commentary toward African American culture in this film, embodied by the character of Mike. Mike represents the struggle of many young African American males to live prosperous lives, avoid criminal elements, and deal with pressure from older generations to engage in reverse racism or violence. Mike struggles to pull the trigger and kill a sheep in this scene, frustrating his grandfather, who snatches away the sheep gun, or whatever the hell you want to call that thing, and shows him how it's done. He then lectures Mike about so much more than just killing sheep, basically telling him that in life, you choose which end of the gun to be on. Grow some courage, pull the trigger, be in control. Violence equals power. And eventually Mike learns this lesson and carries the weapon with him into the film's climax. Also, note the frequently featured painting regarding gang violence outside the butcher shop that Mike delivers to. It's worth noting that the idea of violence equaling power isn't just alluding to African American social issues in the United States. It's alluding to a problem with hypermasculinity that affects all ethnic groups. And speaking of hypermasculinity, meet Henry Bowers, Derry's resident sociopath. The only other character who asserts more masculine dominance in this film is Henry's alcoholic father.
Dad.
Hey!
The character is seemingly the only thing that Henry fears, that and not seeming like a hypermasculine douchebag at any given moment.
Get the fuck out of it now!
Oh yeah, Andy's a racist. I wonder where he got that from. Oh right, his father is a white American police officer. Anyway, many films of this genre that involve large groups of children or teens are a coming-of-age tale, and certainly many people still view this remake of It in that vein. I'd argue that the director took a much different approach to the genre and painted a picture for us that portrays a loss of innocence and corruption of youth. Besides Bev, who has had to grow up being sexually abused by her piece-of-shit father, Richie probably serves as the best example of this. He represents young males who feel the need to assert sexual knowledge and behavior for validation. I mean, listen to his diction throughout the film.
What'd she do? More like who'd she do? For what I hear, the list is longer than my wang. Hey, I wasn't the one scrubbing the bathroom floor and imagining that her sink went on Eddie's mom's vagina on Halloween. Can only virgins see this stuff? Is that why I've not seen this yet?
And he's not the only one. These are fairly young kids who swear more than most adults. It's a normalization of profanity and sexual knowledge which probably isn't far off the mark from the reality of kids today. Feminism in America is also a huge part of the underlying theme in It.
Are you in there by yourself, Beaverly? Or do you have half the guys in the school with you, huh, slut?
You may have noticed that Beaverly is a clever play on the name Beverly because it associates Bev's name with her vagina. This is how we're introduced to Bev, slut-shaming from the get-go. Why is this important? Because Bev's character represents the struggle of all women in America to gain any amount of respect, from society, from men, and even from other women. A number of people have criticized the film for representing Beverly in as archaic a manner as did the book and the 1990 miniseries, but I would argue that there is a point to this. Yes, Beverly does seem to be a reward for the male protagonist, but considering the subtextual topic, this portrayal can be seen as just a small part of a larger statement about the marginalized role of women in America. Let's look at the 2017 version of the Beverly character. She's leaps and bounds more progressive and powerful than the 1990 version. In fact, she is by far the most mature and assertive character in the entire group of protagonists, something that the negative critics of the film often overlooked. She's the first to jump off the cliff into the quarry when everyone else is scared. She isn't scared to go into the evil clown house with Bill when everyone else wants to stay outside. She saves 3 of the boys from Pennywise by stabbing him in the head. She's the only one who barely flinches when Bill slices everyone's hands to make a blood pact. She influences the group to rescue Mike from Henry and his goons, and she's the first to blast Henry in the head with a rock. But in the words of T. Swift, haters gotta hate, 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 hate. It's a prime example of modern American culture concerning feminism, where even if you try to say or do something right, you are still wrong. Because you're a man. You male, director, you. Anyway, back to Beverly, and this is really interesting. Anytime Bev displays too much power, she gets treated like this.
She'll do you. You just gotta ask nicely. Like I did.
Another example of this type of repercussion happens when Bev has single-handedly kicked her abusive father's ass. She stands over top of his unconscious body victorious, and this low camera angle displays her power. This is the highest point she experiences in the film, and it's worth noting that unlike the rest of the group, the fear she experiences is not just past trauma, nor is it imaginary phobias. It's 100% present and real, and she has managed to finally overcome it. But the moment she turns to walk away, Pennywise is there to grab her by the throat, and notice that he uses his right hand to do it. This shows that no matter how much women achieve in society, the patriarchal establishment will always limit their progress. There's also some symbolism in the film regarding feminine reproduction, as Bev is seen shopping for tampons and being embarrassed about it. When their father sees the tampons, he does probably the creepiest shit in the entire movie.
Tell me you're still my little girl.
Implying a history of sexual abuse. In the book, the blood that only kids can see appears to Bill, but here it makes its appearance in Bev's bathroom, alluding to the fact that she's gotten her period. The symbolism is built upon when her father enters, cannot see the blood, and treats Bev like she's mentally unwell. He might as well have just said, "Hey, you're acting irrational. Are you on your period?" But instead, he does this.
Why'd you do this to your hair? Makes you look like a boy.
Asserting gender binaries by suggesting that she needs to act or appear a certain way to be viewed as feminine. Other demographic representations in the film include Stan, who is a rabbi's son and has little interest in the religion. This represents the decline of religious beliefs in America. Stan is also the most resistant to believe that anything supernatural is happening in Derry. And Eddie represents the huge demographic in America that is dependent on the pharmaceutical industry. His mother constantly instills him with fear of illness and allergies, convincing him that his health is excessively poor as a means of controlling him. Of course, this alludes to the manner in which many pharmaceuticals are marketed to the public more in the interest of profit than the well-being well-being of American citizens. Also, this is a comment on the way American healthcare works. Take the pharmacy scene, for example.
Can we afford all that?
That's all we got.
Kidding me?
Later, as Eddie comes into the pharmacy for a refill, Greta, the pharmacist's daughter, informs him that his medications are all placebos, hinting at the idea that Big Pharma markets a lot of shit to the public that we don't actually need. The film also really hits on the Marxist idea of false consciousness and the idea that the powers that be are working to divide the masses by influencing them to fear one another. As Bill walks home, he attempts to recite the tongue twister. Amidst the mists and coldest frost, he thrusts his fists against the posts and still insists he sees the ghosts. I had to actually record that several times to do it right. This is important for one because it's from the 1942 science fiction novel Donovan's Brain, which Stephen King was a huge fan of and included various mentions of in his own work, including the book that inspired this film. The quote is also significant because it was a tongue twister that the main character in Donovan's Brain constantly recited to avoid having his mind controlled by an intelligence that was influencing him to commit evil acts. The film's theme is largely about how the powers that be seek to divide Americans and pit them against one another in order to control the masses. This is achieved through essentially programming public opinion via media, and well, you get what I'm saying. Bill also recites this line as he walks toward the old house on Neibolt Street, preparing to confront Pennywise for the first time, trying to calm his mind and overcome the fear Pennywise instills via mind control. An example of how the theme touches on mass programming via media is when Bev enters her home and we see this shot of a children's show on the TV set. Pennywise has already infiltrated her home at this point because the children's show host is talking about how the sewer is a fun place to play and the kids should follow the water into the drain to get there. This is making a comment on the influence of media on youth, if not on the American public as a whole. In fact, Bev's father is not the only parent who seems to spend a considerable amount of his downtime in front of a television set. Eddie's mom and Henry's dad as well can also be found relaxing in front of the tube, aka government mind control box. This device is used late in the film to tell Henry to murder his father and then everyone else. So the film is implying that media can turn an already mentally unstable person into a potential mass murderer. The subtext also touches on how the members of the masses program each other through repetition. The most prominent example of this is the mindless repetition of the idea, "It's summer, you should be outside."
It's summer. We're supposed to be having fun.
When Ben is trying to educate himself, the librarian says it to him. Basically, stop learning, go play, stop exercising your mind, don't you have friends? Social networking is more important than knowledge. And when the kids get scared about investigating the disappearances or confronting Pennywise, they respond in an emotionless, robotic tone, and no doubt they were coached to say it this way.
Yeah, it's summer. We should be outside.
If you say it's summer one more fucking time.
The main message of this film is that we can't let it divide us. Only by sticking together can we defeat it. And remember what it, aka Pennywise, represents. The corrupt aristocracy, the bourgeoisie, the elite, the upper 1%, the patriarchy, etc. When the kids enter the house on Neibolt Street, Pennywise immediately starts using their fears to divide them, making them argue and also physically separating them. After this midpoint climax, the group becomes divided over whether or not to continue trying to defeat Pennywise. Here, Bev says the line,
This is what it wants. It wants to divide us.
but her point doesn't hit home, leading to a period of estrangement that leaves them all alone and vulnerable. This allows Pennywise to abduct Bev, who he no doubt recognizes as the group's strongest component. And again, this does not make her a damsel in distress, as many critics may argue. It implies her superior strength by making her the most logical target for Pennywise once the group has been successfully divided. This is very telling of the director's view on women in America. Bill gives a similar speech to Bev's as they re-enter the house for the final climax of the film. And as they descend into the well in search of Bev, they're separated numerous times, struggling to stay together, to stay strong and united against it. So in the end, the group emerges victorious because they're able to recognize that their fear isn't real, and that by sticking together, they are able to overcome the oppressing force that is it. If only life in America were that simple. Or is it? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed my analysis of the film. Any likes or shares are greatly appreciated. If you've got any thoughts, any comments, any questions, if you've found anything that I've missed, I'm sure there's tons of subtext in there that hasn't even jumped out at me yet. Feel free to share it in the comment section below. I'd be happy to discuss. And maybe you even have a different reading of the film altogether. Feel free to share that too. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.